My younger brother told our parents I was too unstable to attend Thanksgiving because I'd just been discharged from the hospital. What he didn't mention was that the hospital stay happened because I collapsed at work after ignoring chest pain for 6 hours. What he also didn't mention was that while I was still wearing a heart monitor, he had used my name to guarantee the lease on his restaurant. I found that part out the morning after he uninvited me. I was sitting at my kitchen table in sweatpants, eating toast, because the cardiologist had told me to keep things simple for a few days, when a collections manager called and asked when I planned to cover the $38,000 my brother owed. I thought it was a scam. Then she emailed me the documents. My signature was at the bottom. My social security number was correct. My income was listed almost exactly. And under relationship to primary borrower, my brother had typed one word: partner. I wasn't his partner. I had never invested $1 in his restaurant. In fact, the same brother who apparently needed my credit to keep his business alive had called me less than 24 hours earlier and said, "Honestly, Ryan, you just bring everybody down right now." By noon, I knew two things. First, my family had been lying to me for a lot longer than I realized. Second, Thanksgiving was about to become the least of their problems. I'm 39 and live outside Kansas City. I work in industrial automation, which sounds more interesting than it is. Mostly I design control systems for warehouses, food processing plants, and distribution centers. Good money, long hours. A lot of people calling when expensive machines stop moving. I'm not flashy. Never have been. I drive a 5-year-old Tacoma, own a small house in Overland Park, and spend more money on tools than clothes. My brother Trevor is the opposite. Trevor is 35 and has never met an audience he didn't want to impress. He was popular in school, played baseball, dated the girls everyone noticed, and somehow always knew which person in the room was worth talking to. He wasn't stupid. That would have been easier. He was actually smart enough to convince people his next idea would work. The problem was that none of his ideas ever survived contact with numbers. 4 years ago, he opened a restaurant called North and Pine. The place looked incredible. Exposed brick, open kitchen, cocktails served with smoke coming out of them for reasons I still don't understand. Trevor called it modern Midwestern dining. I called it $26 meatloaf. Still, people liked it. For the first year, it did well. Our parents loved telling everyone their son owned a restaurant. My mother kept business cards in her purse. My father started saying things like, "Trevor's in hospitality," as if he'd personally launched Marriott. Nobody talked much about what I did. That was fine. I didn't need them to. My work paid well enough that when our parents needed a new furnace, I handled it. When Mom needed dental work that insurance wouldn't cover, I paid half. When Dad's truck transmission died, I found a rebuilt one through a supplier and covered the labor. I never announced any of that. That was probably part of the problem. Trevor announced everything. If he bought Mom flowers, Facebook knew. If he took Dad to a Chiefs game, there were 12 pictures. If I paid $6,000 toward a roof repair, the roofer knew, and that was about it. I didn't resent him for being better at presentation. Not then. The relationship between us changed after he opened the restaurant. At first, he asked me for technical help. Could I look at the walk-in freezer controller? Could I check why the kitchen exhaust kept tripping a breaker? Could I help him negotiate with a contractor? Normal brother stuff. Then came money. Not directly. Trevor was too proud for that. He'd say things like, "I'm waiting on a vendor reimbursement. Could you float this for 10 days? Or, payroll timing is weird this month, but catering receivables hit Friday." The first time I loaned him $5,000. He paid back $3,000, then acted like the missing $2,000 had become irrelevant through the passage of time. The next loan was $8,000, then $12,000. Eventually I stopped. That caused our first serious argument. "You know I'm good for it," he said. "No, I know you're good at asking." He didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Mom did, though, constantly. "You know your brother's trying to build something." "So am I." "You already have stability." That sentence became the family rule. Trevor needed help because he was building. I didn't need help because I was stable. It didn't matter how that stability happened. Apparently it had arrived naturally, like eye color. The week before Thanksgiving, I was commissioning a conveyor system at a distribution center in Lenexa. I'd had pressure in my chest since breakfast. I ignored it. Bad habit. Around 3, I got dizzy walking down a mezzanine staircase and sat down because the floor seemed interested in moving. One of the maintenance supervisors took one look at me and called an ambulance. Turned out, I had inflammation around my heart after a viral infection. Not a heart attack. Still serious enough to spend 2 nights in the hospital. I texted the family group chat. Mom responded first. "Oh, honey, keep us updated." Dad sent a thumbs up. Trevor wrote, "Damn, rest up." That was it. He didn't call. Neither did his wife, Melissa. My parents visited the next afternoon for 20 minutes. Mom brought a grocery store plant. I'm fairly certain came from the hospital gift shop. Dad talked mostly about parking. I didn't care. I was tired. I just wanted to go home. The cardiologist discharged me Tuesday morning with medication, activity restrictions, and a very specific warning not to stress myself out. That lasted about 7 hours. At 6 that evening, Trevor called. I answered from my couch. "Hey, you home?" "Yeah." "How you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a slow truck." He laughed. For a second, it felt normal. Then his tone changed. "So listen. I already knew I wasn't going to enjoy whatever came next. Melissa and I have been talking about Thursday. Thanksgiving was at their house that year. What about it? We've got more people coming than expected." "Okay. Some investors." I rubbed my chest. "Investors at Thanksgiving?" "Not officially." He lowered his voice like someone might be listening. "One of Melissa's clients is bringing her husband. He's involved with a restaurant group." Now I understood. Thanksgiving had become a pitch meeting. "That sounds fun." "Yeah, potentially huge." There was a pause. "Which is why we think maybe you should sit this one out." I thought I'd misheard him. "What?" "You just got out of the hospital." "I'm not contagious." "I know. Then what's the issue?" He exhaled. "Ryan, you look rough right now." I actually looked down at myself. Gray t-shirt, sweatpants, blanket. I was in my own living room. "It's Thanksgiving. It's also an opportunity." He continued before I could answer. "These people are polished. Melissa's already nervous. Mom's nervous. Everybody's trying to make a good impression. And I prevent that? You know what I mean." "No, I really don't." Another pause. Then he said it. "You'd bring the energy down." I didn't speak. "Come on, man. You're pale. You're tired. You're probably not going to want to talk to anybody." "I was in the hospital." "Exactly." He said it like that solved the argument. "We can bring you a plate later." I stared at the dark television across from me. "Did Mom and Dad agree with this?" He hesitated. That answered the question. "Mom just thinks you should rest." "Did Dad?" He said it makes sense. I nodded even though Trevor couldn't see me. "Okay, don't be like that." "Like what?" "Make this into some rejection thing." "You called to tell me not to come to Thanksgiving?" "For your health, too." That almost made me laugh. "Sure, Ryan." "I heard you." I ended the call. 10 minutes later, Mom texted, "Please don't be upset. Trevor has a lot riding on Thursday. We'll do something together soon." Soon. Family's favorite word when they wanted you to accept being treated badly in the present. I didn't answer. I went to bed early. The collections call came the next morning. The woman introduced herself as Dana from Heartland Commercial Leasing. Mr. Mercer, I'm following up regarding North and Pine. I think you have the wrong person. You're listed as guarantor. No, I'm not. A pause. Then, Ryan Mercer? Yes. Brother of Trevor Mercer. Every part of me went still. Yes. We have your personal guarantee on file. I sat down. How much? The account is currently $38,412 past due. I actually checked the phone screen to make sure I was awake. I never signed anything. She became more careful. Sir, I can email the executed documents? Do that. 2 minutes later, they arrived. Lease extension. Equipment financing. Personal guarantee. My name, my address, my social security number, my signature, not perfect. Good enough. There was also an income statement. My actual salary was off by less than $5,000. Trevor shouldn't have known that number. My parents did. Dad had seen my tax return the previous spring, when I helped them refinance their house. I called him immediately. He answered after 4 rings. Hey, bud. Did you give Trevor my tax information? Silence, not confusion. Silence. My chest tightened. Dad. He was in a bind. I closed my eyes. What did you give him? He said he needed proof the family had financial backing. My social security number. He already had most of that. From who? Ryan, calm down. The cardiologist had told me the same thing the day before. It sounded different coming from my father. You gave him my financial information. He said it was temporary. What did he tell you he was using it for? Another pause. Then Dad said very quietly, to keep the restaurant open through winter. I looked at the forged signature again. You knew he was using my name. He said you'd help if he asked. He didn't ask. I know. Did Mom know? Dad didn't answer. That was enough. I ended the call. Then I called the leasing company back. I need your fraud department. After that, I called an attorney. Then my bank. Then my credit monitoring service. By noon, my identity was locked down. By 1, my lawyer had copies of everything. At 1:30, Trevor called. I watched his name flash on the screen. Didn't answer. He called again. Then texted. Dad said you're freaking out. Don't do anything stupid. We can explain everything Thursday. Thursday. The Thanksgiving dinner I was no longer invited to. I stared at the message. Then another arrived. Seriously. If you report this, you could destroy the restaurant. I typed back 1 sentence. Then you probably shouldn't have built it on my name. And for the first time in years, I stopped worrying about what would happen to Trevor if I refused to save him. Trevor called me 9 times before noon. I ignored everyone. Then Melissa called, then my mother, then a number I didn't recognize. That one turned out to be Trevor's restaurant attorney. Apparently, Thanksgiving had become a legal emergency before anyone had even put the turkey in the oven. My attorney, Laura Benton, had already told me not to discuss the forged guarantee with anyone directly. Once they know you're treating this as fraud, she said, they'll start coordinating stories. So I just say nothing? You say exactly enough. She sent me 1 sentence. Please direct all further communication regarding the North and Pine lease guarantee to counsel. I copied it into the family group chat. My mother responded first. Ryan, don't be ridiculous, this is family. Trevor followed. You're really getting a lawyer involved over paperwork? Then Dad. Call me. We can fix this privately. That last message bothered me more than the others. Privately. meaning without the leasing company, without lawyers, without anyone asking how my name ended up on a six-figure commercial agreement I never signed. I didn't answer. By that afternoon, Laura had the restaurant's full leasing file. The original agreement wasn't the problem. Trevor had signed that himself 3 years earlier. The problem came 14 months later when the restaurant started missing payments. The equipment company agreed to restructure the debt if Trevor provided a personal guarantor with a stable income. That was me, at least on paper. The forged document covered refrigeration equipment, kitchen financing, and a supplemental operating line. Maximum exposure, $82,000. I stared at the number. I thought they said 38. That's what's currently delinquent, Laura explained. If the restaurant defaults completely, they can pursue the rest. I leaned back in my chair. How close is it to default? She looked at me. Very. That explained Thanksgiving. The investors weren't casual guests. Trevor wasn't networking. He was trying to find someone to inject cash before the entire restaurant collapsed. And he had uninvited me because I was sick. Or maybe because he didn't want the one person in the room who knew his finances well enough to ask questions. That possibility sat badly with me. I asked Laura to keep digging. Then I did something I probably should have done years earlier. I pulled every transfer I'd ever made to Trevor. Loans, repairs, emergency payroll help, vendor deposits. There were more than I remembered. 2,000 here, 5 there, 8,000 one summer when the air conditioning unit failed, another 6 when he claimed a supplier had double billed him. Over 4 years, I had transferred just under $47,000. He had repaid 11. I had never formalized most of it because he was my brother. There were texts, though, plenty. I'll get you next month. Once the catering contract pays, I'm clearing what I owe you. You know I'm not trying to screw you. That last one aged poorly. I forwarded everything to Laura. She called me 10 minutes later. You understand this changes leverage. How? If these were loans, and he acknowledged them as debts, they may be recoverable. I don't care about the money. That's fine. She paused. But people behave differently when there are consequences attached. I knew she was right. I also hated that she was right. I had spent years telling myself, Trevor wasn't taking advantage of me because I was choosing to help. That distinction only works while both people respect it. Once someone forges your signature, generosity starts looking a lot like access. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up to a text from Mom. Please come tonight. Forget what Trevor said. We should all be together. That was interesting. 2 days earlier, my presence threatened the investors. Now apparently, family unity mattered again. I texted one question. Did Trevor tell you about the fraud investigation? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, he made a mistake. I sat at the edge of my bed staring at that sentence. Not, we didn't know. Not, what are you talking about? A mistake. They knew. Maybe not every detail. Enough, I replied. I won't be there. Mom called immediately. I answered because I wanted to hear her say it. Ryan, this is getting out of hand. I agree. Your brother is under enormous pressure. That doesn't give him permission to use my identity. He thought you would help. Then why didn't he ask? Silence. Because he knew I'd say no, Mom sighed. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Trevor has children. So do thousands of people who don't commit fraud. That's cruel. No. I stood and walked toward the kitchen. What's cruel is everyone deciding my consent was optional because Trevor needed something. She lowered her voice. We were trying to protect the restaurant From what? Failure. There it was. The family mission. Save Trevor from failure, always. Whatever it cost. Mom, did you give Dad permission to share my tax documents? She hesitated. We both thought it would help. I closed my eyes. How much did you know? We knew Trevor needed backing. You knew he was putting my name down? He said he'd explain it to you. When? After things stabilized? I almost laughed. So, the plan was to tell me after he no longer needed permission. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. Her voice turned sharp. You're recovering from a heart issue. Maybe this isn't the time to make permanent decisions. That one got me. For years, my stability meant I could absorb everything. Now my health meant I shouldn't be trusted to react. Convenient. I'm hanging up. Ryan. I ended the call. Then I blocked the family group chat for the rest of the day. I spent Thanksgiving with my neighbor Frank. He was 62, widowed, and made enough food for 10 people, even though only his daughter and grandson were coming. When he found out I was alone, he simply said, "Bring pie." No questions, no pity. I sat at his table wearing a hoodie and the monitor patch the cardiologist had told me to keep on for another week. Nobody cared what I looked like. Frank's grandson asked me how warehouse robots knew where to go. His daughter sent me home with leftovers. It was the best Thanksgiving I'd had in years. At 9 that night, I turned my phone back on. 23 notifications. Most were from Trevor. The last one said, "You cost me the investors. Happy now?" I frowned. I hadn't spoken to any investors. Then another message arrived. They found out about the guarantee issue. Someone told them. I called Laura. She answered from what sounded like a noisy family gathering. "Sorry." "You're fine. What happened?" I explained. She became quiet, then said, "We notified the leasing company, not investors." "No? Could the leasing company have contacted them?" "Only if they were performing due diligence." That made sense. If investors were serious, they would review debts. And when they did, they found a commercial guarantee under investigation for fraud. Trevor's problem wasn't me. It was paperwork again. An hour later, Melissa texted, "Not angry. Desperate. Please call me." Trevor hasn't told me everything. I waited. Then another message. "The restaurant owes more than I knew." And another. "Our house is tied to it." That was new. I called her. She answered crying. "What do you mean the house is tied to it?" "Trevor took out a second mortgage." "When?" "Last year." "Did you sign?" "Yes." "Then you knew." "I thought it was for renovations and expansion." "How much?" She took a breath. 120,000. I sat down. "Melissa, where did it go?" "I don't know." "Ask him." "He won't tell me." That didn't sound like Trevor. He usually had an explanation for everything, even bad ones. What did the investors say? "They walked out." "Why?" "They said his numbers were inconsistent." "How inconsistent?" She started crying harder. "Ryan, he showed them revenue reports that don't match our taxes." My stomach tightened. "That's not a small problem." "I know." Then she said something that changed the entire direction of things. "There's another account." "What account?" "I found statements in his office." "What kind?" "Business checking. Different bank." "How much?" "I don't know. Trevor keeps the login." "Why are you telling me?" "Because your name is on that one too." I went completely still. "My name?" "As co-owner." I closed my eyes. North and Pine had never been mine. Not one share. Not one percentage. I had never signed ownership papers. "What bank?" She told me. I wrote it down, then asked the only question that mattered. "Did Trevor ever tell people I owned part of the restaurant?" Melissa became quiet. Finally, Yes. How many? I don't know. Investors? Yes. Vendors? Probably. The forged guarantee suddenly looked smaller. Trevor hadn't just used my identity to secure debt. He had been using my income, my credit, and my reputation to make his failing restaurant look financially backed. And if Melissa was right, he had been telling the business world I was his partner for years. By midnight, I wasn't wondering whether the restaurant would survive anymore. I was wondering how much of it had ever been real. Laura called me at 8:15 the next morning. I found the second account. I was standing in my kitchen making coffee. How? The bank responded to the fraud inquiry faster than expected. And? She paused. You're listed as a 50% owner of North and Pine. I put the coffee mug down. I'm not. I know. What exactly do they have? Operating documents? Signatures? Tax forms? Loan disclosures? I stared out the window. Rain was coming down hard against the deck. How old? 3 years. 3 years. That meant this wasn't something Trevor created during a recent panic. He had been using me for most of the restaurant's life. What did I supposedly contribute? $200,000 in startup capital. I actually laughed. Laura didn't. I never gave him anything close to that. We know. Where did the number come from? That's the interesting part. She sent the document. Under capital contribution, there were 4 entries: cash, equipment, intellectual property, and family investment support. The last category was valued at $90,000. What the hell is family investment support? Not a real accounting term. So he invented it. Looks that way. I kept scrolling. My supposed ownership had been used to reassure lenders that North and Pine had a financially stable silent partner. That silent partner was me. I owned half the restaurant when Trevor needed credibility. I owned none of it when profits were discussed. That was almost impressive. What do we do? Laura answered immediately. We separate you from the business legally. And Trevor? That comes later. By noon, my fraud affidavit was filed with both banks. Laura sent formal notices to every lender we could identify, stating that I had never consented to ownership, guarantees, or financing. The restaurant's accounts were flagged. The equipment company suspended further credit. The second bank froze any new withdrawals requiring partner authorization. Trevor called 20 minutes after that happened. This time I answered. What did you do? His voice was hoarse. Corrected the record. You froze operating cash. No. The bank froze it because my name was on documents I didn't sign. Payroll is Monday. Then use the money you actually have. You know how restaurants work. I know how fraud works. He went silent. Then tried a softer tone. Ryan, I screwed up. You did. I was trying to protect everybody. From what? Losing everything. Whose everything? He exhaled. The restaurant. That's yours. The family invested in it. I didn't. You helped. With loans you never repaid. I was going to. When? When we stabilized. That word again. Stabilized. The imaginary future point where every lie would somehow become acceptable. Trevor, why am I listed as a co-owner? He didn't answer. Why? Lenders wouldn't extend us. So you used me. I used the family balance sheet. I almost respected the corporate wording. The family balance sheet? Come on, man. You have assets. Mom and Dad have equity. We all benefit if the restaurant succeeds. No. I kept my voice calm. You benefit? He got angry again. You've always been like this. Like what? Obsessed with technicalities. My signature is a technicality? You know what I mean. No, I don't. He lowered his voice. If the restaurant closes, 30 people lose jobs. There it was. The guilt. Not me. Employees, kids, family. Always someone innocent standing between Trevor and consequences. Then you should have protected their jobs by running a solvent business. You think you're better than me? No. I looked at the hospital discharge papers still sitting on my counter. I think you've been protected from failure so long that you started believing failure was something other people owed you protection from. He didn't speak. Then he said quietly, if you keep pushing this, Mom and Dad lose their house. I froze. What? He realized too late what he'd said. Trevor, forget it. Why would they lose their house? They helped. How? Silence. I felt my pulse speed up. Exactly what the cardiologist told me to avoid. Trevor, they took a home equity line. How much? Ryan, how much? 75. I closed my eyes. Our parents had mortgaged their house for his restaurant. Again. When? 8 months ago. Do they know how bad things are? They know enough. That explained everything. Why Mom begged me not to report fraud. Why Dad gave Trevor my tax documents. They weren't protecting their favorite son anymore. They were protecting their own bad decision. If Trevor collapsed, they went with him. And apparently the solution had been to quietly attach me to the wreckage. I ended the call. 5 minutes later, Mom called. I let it ring. Then Dad. Then Trevor again. I turned the phone off. That afternoon, Laura came to my house. Not her office, my house. That alone told me something was wrong. She sat at the kitchen table and opened a folder. We found a third lender. I almost laughed. Of course we did. This one matters more. She slid a financing statement toward me. A private loan. $250,000. Secured against North and Pine's future receivables. Trevor had borrowed from a private investment group called Calder Hospitality Capital. The document listed 3 guarantors. Trevor, my father, and me. I stared at the page. I never signed this. We know. What about Dad? That signature appears real. My father hadn't just known. He'd signed beside my forged name. I leaned back. Who is Calder? Private lender. Expensive rates. Very aggressive collections. How aggressive? They don't break kneecaps. She gave me a look. But they move quickly in court. Then she pointed to one clause. If North and Pine defaulted, Calder could pursue guarantor assets, house equity, accounts, personal property, my parents' home, my home, everything. How far behind? 2 payments. When is default? Monday. 3 days. What happens then? They can accelerate the entire balance. I looked at the date. Thanksgiving weekend suddenly made sense in a way I hated. Trevor didn't need investors because he wanted to expand. He needed them because by Monday, he could lose the restaurant, our parents could lose their house, and I could be dragged into litigation over a loan I never knew existed. He knew. Laura nodded. He knew exactly what this weekend was. And he still uninvited me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Sunday morning, my parents showed up at my door. I watched them through the camera before opening. Mom looked exhausted. Dad looked worse. I stepped onto the porch but didn't invite them inside. Mom noticed. That hurt her. Good. Maybe boundaries were supposed to be uncomfortable at first. Ryan, Dad said. We need to talk. About Calder? His face dropped. So you know. I know enough. Mom clasped her hands. We didn't know Trevor used your name without asking. I looked at Dad. He did. Mom turned toward him. Dad stared at the porch floor. You signed beside me. I thought Trevor had spoken to you. No, you didn't. He flinched. I had never spoken to my father that way. Turns out 40 years of restraint can make one sentence very efficient. We were going to explain. When? After the investors came in. So after the debt was covered. Dad nodded slightly. At that point, no harm. I laughed. No harm. Mom started crying. Please. This isn't just Trevor anymore. We could lose the house. There it was. The real reason they came. Not an apology. Fear. I didn't put your house at risk. We know. Then why are you asking me to fix it? Because you can. That sentence nearly finished whatever relationship we still had. Not because you should. Not because it's fair. Because I can. I looked at them. You mortgaged your home to finance his restaurant? Mom wiped her eyes. He's our son. So am I. Silence. A long one. Dad finally whispered, We made mistakes. Yes? And now? Now you deal with them. Mom stared at me. You'd let us lose everything? No. I shook my head. You're still doing it. You keep describing consequences as something I'm doing to you. Before either could answer, a black SUV pulled up behind their car. A man in a dark coat stepped out carrying a leather portfolio. My father's face went white. You have got to be kidding me. I looked at him. You know him? Dad didn't answer. The man walked up the driveway. Ryan Mercer? Yes. He handed me a card. Daniel Price? Calder, Hospitality Capital. I'm here regarding North and Pine. Then he looked at my parents. Not surprised to see them. Almost like he expected them. We need to discuss Monday's default. I looked from him to my father. And suddenly I realized Calder hadn't come looking for me because Trevor missed payments. They had been given my home address before I even knew the loan existed. Daniel Price waited until my parents stepped back before speaking again. I'm not here to threaten anyone. His tone was calm. I'm here because Monday changes what our company is required to do. I looked at the business card in my hand. Why come to me? Because your name appears on multiple loan documents. I never signed them. I've read the fraud affidavit your attorney filed. That caught my attention. You know about it? We received notice yesterday. He looked toward my father. Which is why I wanted to speak with everyone before this became more complicated. My mother grabbed Dad's arm. There has to be another option. Daniel nodded. There usually is. He opened the portfolio and removed a thin folder. The restaurant isn't failing because of one missed payment. He slid a spreadsheet toward me. It listed 6 loans, not one. Equipment financing, kitchen renovations, working capital, merchant cash advances, private credit, vendor debt. I scanned the totals. Almost $1 million. I looked at my father. You knew? His shoulders dropped. No, not all of it. Trevor had told them about the home equity loan, not the rest. Daniel folded his hands. Your brother refinanced repeatedly. Each time he used projected revenue that never materialized. He stayed current by borrowing again? So this wasn't a bad season. No, it was years. My mother sat down on the porch steps. I don't understand. Daniel answered gently. He stopped running a restaurant. He started managing debt. An hour later, Laura arrived. She had expected a meeting with Calder's legal department. She hadn't expected them to already be standing in my driveway. Daniel greeted her professionally. The two of them spoke for nearly 20 minutes, while I stood with my parents. Finally, Laura walked over. Good news, I laughed. That would be a first. Calder accepts that your guarantee is fraudulent. I blinked. Just like that? They hired a handwriting expert yesterday. And she agrees. Relief washed over me. For the first time in days, I felt like I could take a full breath. What about my parents? Laura looked at them. Their situation is different. Dad nodded. I signed. Yes. But she looked at Daniel. Calder isn't interested in taking your house. Mom looked up hopefully. You're not? Daniel shook his head. We're interested in recovering money. Foreclosing on retired homeowners is expensive. What we want is cooperation. He turned to me. And information? And by Monday morning, Trevor finally understood that no one was coming to rescue him. The investors were gone. The banks had frozen new credit. The leasing company had opened a fraud investigation. Calder wanted full financial disclosure. He called me just after sunrise. I'll confess. I stayed quiet. I'll tell everyone it was me. It was. I mean, everything. Good. You'll help after that. No. He sounded genuinely shocked. But I'll admit it. I believe you. You're still saying no? Yes. Long silence. Finally, he asked, So that's it? I looked out the kitchen window. No. You still have the opportunity to tell the truth. What happens after that isn't up to me. Trevor met with investigators that afternoon. Over the next 3 weeks, the entire story came apart. The forged lease guarantee, the fake ownership documents, the altered financial statements, the revenue reports shown to investors, the signatures, the hidden bank account, everything. Melissa cooperated immediately. She handed over laptops, accounting software, and years of emails. My parents did the same. Dad admitted giving Trevor my tax returns. Mom admitted encouraging him to straighten things out later. Neither tried to minimize it anymore. They had finally reached the point where honesty cost less than denial. North and Pine closed before Christmas. Not because I reported the fraud. Because there had never been enough money to keep it open. Employees received unpaid wages through the bankruptcy process. The equipment was auctioned. The building sat empty for months. The sign came down one cold morning in January. I drove past it on the way to a client. For a second, I almost stopped. Instead, I kept driving. Some chapters don't need one last look. Trevor eventually accepted a plea agreement on several financial fraud charges. He avoided prison because he cooperated, had no prior criminal history, and agreed to full restitution. He also lost the restaurant, his business licenses, and any chance of borrowing money for a very long time. The judge looked directly at him before sentencing. Being under pressure explains bad decisions. It does not excuse dishonest ones. Trevor nodded. For once, he didn't argue. My relationship with my parents took longer. Dad showed up one Saturday with a folder. Inside were copies of every document he'd signed for Trevor over the years. I should have said no much earlier. Yes. I thought helping him meant protecting him. It didn't. He looked around my garage. I forgot I had another son who deserved protecting too. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him. It was enough to start, not enough to finish. Trust comes back slower than regret. 6 months after everything ended, Frank invited me over again for dinner. Same dining room, same old oak table. His grandson asked whether warehouse robots ever got lost. I laughed. Only when people give them bad instructions. Frank smiled. Sounds familiar. It did. On the drive home, I realized something. For years, I believed being the dependable one meant quietly absorbing everyone else's mistakes. I thought stability was something you gave away. It isn't. Stability is something you protect. Not because you're selfish. Because the moment people believe you'll always save them, They stop believing they need to save themselves. The hospital stay that started this whole mess turned out to be the least important thing that happened that week. The real diagnosis wasn't mine. It belonged to my family. We had spent years confusing love with rescue. Once that ended, something healthier finally had room to begin, and I never missed another Thanksgiving, wondering whether I belonged at the table. If people want you there, they don't make you earn your seat. They simply pull out a chair